The city bustled with its usual rhythm, the kind of rhythm that drowned out whispers of forgotten lives. Glass towers pierced the sky, their reflections shimmering against the afternoon sun, and down below, people rushed with their coffees, briefcases, and dreams tucked neatly into their schedules. Among the crowd was a little girl, perhaps 10 years old, standing with a backpack that had seen better days and shoes that spoke of journeys too long for such small feet. She clutched a worn-out lunchbox, not because it had food inside, but because it was the only thing she carried that still reminded her of her late nights with her mother, who used to pack it with simple meals and kind words. Her mother had been strong, raising her alone after the man who had once promised forever walked away. 7 years had passed since he abandoned them, 7 years of hardship, and yet the girl carried no bitterness, only the quiet hope that kindness still existed somewhere in this wide world. Inside one of those glass towers, the CEO of a multinational company adjusted his tie before stepping into a boardroom filled with men and women who hung onto his every word. He was successful by every standard: wealth, influence, reputation. People feared his decisions and envied his life. But behind his perfectly tailored suit and polished shoes was a man who had once made a choice, a selfish choice, to leave behind a woman who loved him and a daughter he never held in his arms. He buried the memory, convincing himself that success required sacrifice, and that some bonds could be forgotten in exchange for power. He had silenced the guilt for years, until today. Because outside his skyscraper, standing with trembling courage, the little girl he had left behind had gathered enough strength to step inside, clutching her mother's last words: "One day, if you ever meet him, don't ask for money, don't ask for anything, just ask if you can share a meal with him. If he says yes, you'll know he has a heart. If he says no, you'll know that you and I were always enough." The girl's feet carried her through the grand lobby where marble floors sparkled like rivers of glass. People stared, security guards, assistants, executives rushing with tablets and coffee cups, but she did not stop. Her small hands trembled as she pressed the elevator button, unsure how she would even reach him. But fate is strange. Sometimes doors open not because you knock loudly but because life wills it. The CEO stepped out of the elevator at that very moment, surrounded by assistants handing him papers, whispering updates. And then he saw her. At first, he didn't recognize her. To him, she was just a small girl standing in his way. But then her eyes met his, and there was something hauntingly familiar, something he had tried to erase from memory. Those eyes, the same eyes as her mother. His chest tightened as she stepped forward, her voice trembling yet steady. "Can I have lunch with you?" she asked. The hallway fell silent. The assistants froze, unsure whether to pull her away or wait for his command. The CEO's world, built on control and precision, suddenly cracked open with that one question. Lunch. Not money, not favors, just lunch. His first instinct was to dismiss her. He could already hear the whispers: a CEO dining with a poor child, an uninvited guest in his carefully constructed world. But her words lodged in his chest like a thorn. He tried to speak, but the memory of her mother's laughter, the laughter he had buried, echoed faintly in his mind. For 7 years, he had not thought of the child he abandoned, but now she stood before him asking for the simplest act of humanity. "What's your name?" he asked softly, though he already feared the answer. "My name is Amina," she replied, her voice shaking but her gaze steady. His breath caught. That was the name he and her mother had chosen long ago, before he left. The board meeting was forgotten. The papers in his hand slipped as he nodded slowly. "All right," he whispered, "let's have lunch." His assistants exchanged shocked glances, but no one dared interrupt. He led her toward a private dining room reserved for high-profile clients. She looked around, her eyes wide at the chandeliers, the polished tables, the waiters in crisp uniforms. When the waiter approached with menus written in elegant French, Amina whispered, Do you have a sandwich?" "Just a sandwich." The waiter blinked, then nodded, while the CEO cleared his throat, ordering the most expensive dish almost out of habit. As they sat in silence, the CEO tried to mask his discomfort. "Why did you come here?" he asked, his voice steady but his heart trembling. Amina opened her lunchbox slowly, showing him the empty space inside. "My mother used to say that food tastes better when you share it with someone you love. She said if I ever met you, I should ask you for lunch. Not for money, not for help, just lunch." Her words sliced through him like a blade. For years, he had justified his decision to abandon them, telling himself they were better off without him. Yet here was the living truth, his daughter, surviving without bitterness, still choosing kindness over resentment. Tears threatened to rise, but he forced them back. "Your mother, is she well?" he asked hesitantly. Amina looked down, her fingers tracing the edge of her lunchbox. "She got sick last winter. She's not here anymore." The CEO's chest tightened as though the air had been stolen from the room. Guilt, heavier than any burden he had carried in business, crushed him in that moment. He had missed it all, the struggle, the laughter, the last goodbye. And now, only this child sat before him, carrying the weight of 2 lives. Silence hung heavy until the waiter returned with a simple sandwich. Amina smiled softly, thanking him as though it were a feast. She took a small bite and pushed the plate toward the CEO. "Here, share it with me. That's what lunch is supposed to be." The simplicity of her act broke him. This little girl, who had every right to hate him, was teaching him what humanity meant. He took the sandwich, his hands trembling, and for the first time in years, he felt something real. Not profit margins, not quarterly reports, just the raw, painful beauty of connection. The CEO excused himself briefly, leaving the table under the pretense of taking a call. But in reality, he stepped into the restroom, gripping the sink as tears fell unchecked. He had built an empire, but he had lost his soul. Now, in the face of his daughter's innocence, he realized that all the wealth in the world meant nothing without love, without family. He looked in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. For the first time in years, he whispered a prayer, one for forgiveness, one for a second chance. When he returned, Amina was humming softly, a tune her mother used to sing. "Do you remember this song?" she asked. He nodded, his throat tight. "Yes, she used to sing it when she cooked." Amina smiled. She said it was her song of hope. The CEO couldn't hold back anymore. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry for leaving, for everything." Amina looked at him with eyes far older than her years. "Mom forgave you a long time ago," she said. "Carrying anger is too heavy for the heart. She just wanted me to know if you could still care." That moment became the turning point. The CEO cancelled the rest of his meetings that day. He walked Amina through the city, holding her small hand, introducing her not as a stranger but as his daughter. His employees, shocked at first, soon softened when they saw the way he looked at her, with a love and regret that could not be hidden. He took her to a bookstore, letting her pick out as many as she wanted, remembering her mother's love for stories. He bought her warm clothes, not because money could heal the past, but because he wanted her to know she would never go without again. But the true gift came not from the material things. It came from the promise he made that evening, as they stood by the city's river watching the lights shimmer on the water. "Amina," he said, kneeling to meet her eyes, "I cannot undo the past. I cannot bring your mother back. But I promise you this, I will never leave you again. From today, you are not alone." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "That's all I wanted." In the months that followed, the CEO's life transformed. He still ran his company, but now his office door opened not just for board members but for his daughter, who would come after school with her backpack and her stories. He established a foundation in her mother's name, supporting single mothers and children in need. The world noticed, calling it a rebranding of his legacy. But those who truly knew him understood it wasn't about business, it was about redemption. Amina grew, not in wealth, but in love. She learned that forgiveness is not weakness, but strength. The CEO learned that compassion is the greatest success one can achieve. And together, they built a bond that healed old wounds. Years later, when Amina stood at her graduation, she spoke to the audience about her journey. "I once asked a man for lunch," she said with a smile. "I didn't ask for money, or power, or gifts. Just lunch. And that lunch changed my life. Because sometimes, all it takes is one small act of kindness to remind us that humanity is still alive." The crowd stood in ovation, tears in their eyes, for they understood that her story was not just hers, but a reflection of what the world could be if we chose love over abandonment, compassion over pride. And so the story ends not with a man defined by his empire, nor a child defined by her loss, but with two souls rediscovering the truth that binds us all: we are never too broken to be forgiven, never too lost to be found, and never too late to begin again.